And it's during the lunch hour of the 1st of August on Monday in Lavonia, Georgia at the county library. And I'm speaking with Mr. Jack Atherton. And Mr. Atherton, could you tell me something of your experience during World War II and those years?
Well, I happened to be a member joining up with the Maritime Service. And we were called pretty much professional sailors. Anyhow, I graduated from Kansas State University in January '43. And previous to the summer, to that time in the summers, I got a job working with the Waterbury Tool Company, whose business was building hydraulic equipment, elevating and training gears for the Bureau of Ships, and steering mechanisms and strictly all hydraulic equipment for ships, battleships, all types of ships. And in the summer I was in the drafting room, and when I got out of school I went to work with them permanently and on heavy equipment for cruisers and battleships. And being single, they said, "You're a good engineer, so we'll just keep you on the payroll, forget the draft." Well, all of a sudden, after being with them for a year and a half or so, looking around my neighborhood, I'm the only single young guy in the community. This is in Waterbury, Connecticut. So my father says, "You better get into service soon, get somewhere soon," because he says, "You're the only single guy that I know of in the community." And he's a retired Navy officer, so that was a pretty good tip. So I went down to New Haven, Connecticut on March 17th, 1944, which was St. Patrick's Day, to the Maritime Service. And I told him about my background. I said, "We need you in a hurry." So he said, "We've got ships that need engineers, and we'll run you through a fast training program." So I went to New York on March 21st, which was only about 4 days later, and they swore me in. They said, "You're going to start to school on March 24th and be what we call a 6 weeks wonder. And that'll give you all the marine training you need to get on a ship and help us." So they sent me to Hoffman Island. Now, Hoffman Island is a school for marine engineers in the Bay in New York City, right opposite Staten Island. And when you're in Hoffman Island, you can look right across the bay to Coney Island. And so the first ship I was on, the first 2 days there, was a tugboat. So they're going to make me a diesel engineer expert. So I learned in 1 to 2 weeks there a little bit about diesel engineering, electric propulsion, and some of the marine rules. So at the end of I think we were there about 10 days. So then they sent us over to New York City on East 23rd Street to get on the Liberty ship. We're going to be steam power engineers on Liberty ship. Well, at that time they were building Liberty ships all the total coasts. East Coast, West Coast, Mississippi, everybody was building Liberty ships. Use them for cargo. So we went to school over there for another 2 weeks. So I'm out of that school come the 1st of May. So I'm over there in March and April, and my 6 weeks are up at the 1st of May. So the War Shipping Administration ran the Maritime Service, or vice versa. And so at that time they sent me over to 25 Broadway to get a ship. Well, I didn't know too much about that, but they said, "Well, Bethlehem Steel's got some Liberty ships over in Todd Basin in Brooklyn. We're loading them right now. How soon can you get over there? I said, well, let me go home for a day or two, and I'll be back. So I came back on May 2nd. And I got on a Liberty ship, and they were loading that Liberty ship with PX supplies, hospital supplies, and stuff that they needed badly. But they've got all that in the ship and undercover. And then they brought on about 20 6x6 Army trucks, the great big ones with the double wheels everywhere. They loaded them on the deck and tied them down, and before you know it, everything was secure. And alongside of us in Todd Basin was the old Normandy passenger vessel that the French had, that they were overhauling and caught fire and sank in Todd Basin. But anyhow, on May 17th we sailed. And at that time the Atlantic Ocean was fairly heavy with German submarines. So they put us in a slow convoy. We went from New York up out the outside of Cape Cod, and then up to Boston, and we got a few more ships up in Boston, and then we ran to Halifax. And in Halifax we picked up a few destroyers as escorts for a convoy to run to North England. So the ship got to Scotland, I'd say probably about the 15th or 20th of May. Well, there were just dozens and dozens of ships tied up at Greenock and Gourock in Scotland, waiting for the ships that were down around Liverpool in southern England to get all together and get this invasion going. So no one seemed to know whether the invasion was late May, June, or July, but they were just stockpiling ships everywhere. So we stayed in Scotland about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. Then we went down to Liverpool. And then we went to Swansea. Then we went to Swansea and Bristol. Then we went to Plymouth, England. They got a big harbor down there. So they stocked some ships in there. So we sat there for about 10 days, and it was the first 10 days of June. The harbor up at Portsmouth, England, which is just outside Southampton where this whole thing started, was just loaded with ships. So we had to wait our turn. So we were in Plymouth or during the invasion. But then as soon as the invasion started, the whole supply people started moving through the English Channel. So it was the supply people moving in the English Channel along with German submarines everywhere, some German small cruisers, and there was a lot of action in the English Channel. So we finally moved up to Portsmouth about the 15th of June. Then from then, as soon as they finished making the temporary docks in the invasion landing, and I've got some pictures of that. And these pictures were taken the first and the second week after the invasion. They're still building them. Ships are starting to move into the docks. It's real crude engineering, but it's all Navy Seabeat work, and it's tremendous engineering work. Well, hell, that's right down my bailiwick, and I enjoyed that. And so that I'm going to imagine about the third or fourth week in June we went over with our load. Well, because we had a fairly new ship and it was in good shape, they decided to take our ship and shuttle. We'd go over there for a day, come back and load for a day or two or three, go back over there and come back. Well, on one trip we were delayed over there and we got ashore and we went up to a little village by the name of Caratan or something. I've got that written down here. But we shuttled, and after we shuttled until about the second week in October of '44, we came back to New York City. And that was the end of that first voyage. Well, I sailed as 4th Assistant Engineer, which is a warrant officer. So I went to school for a week and then took an exam, and I then became a 3rd Assistant, which was a full-wide strike. So I sailed 3rd Assistant on the next ship. The next ship was on a bomb run. And we loaded, it was an old Hog Island vessel. And for people that sailed in the 20s and 30s, Hog Island was a low-built ship, all steel, and turbine instead of an up-and-down engine like the Liberty ships had. And it had been on the Murmansk bomb run. It had survived several fracases on that. So anyhow, we loaded in Earl, New Jersey, which is just outside of Staten Island, and on the east coast of New Jersey, just about 5 miles from Staten Island. We loaded bombs, and that's where the government had the big bomb loading thing. So we loaded 5,000 tons of bombs on that Hog Island ship, and we left. The name of that ship was the SS Ormar. Well, the ship was originally built in 1919 or 20 and had General Electric turbines and engines on it and all stuff like that. It was at that time called the Edgemore. Well, the thing had been recommissioned and it ended up being the Ormar. So the Ormar was on the previous, in 1940 and 41 and 42 and thereabouts, it was on the bomb run to Murmansk and escaped at least 4 or 5 major scrapes there, because the same crew that was on the Ormar when I got on it had just come back. And so what they told me was pretty official, and it was a tremendous fine captain, and he was from Mobile. But anyhow, this bomb run, they decided that that was the slowest ship in the group, because the majority of ships were quite a bit younger. And so we were always on the tail end of every convoy. So we went from New York up the Long Island Sound through the Cape Cod Canal, stayed in Boston a day or two, and up to Halifax. But we was always on the tail end of every convoy we were on. And that's the last few ships are always carrying bombs. The other ships with passengers and troops and so forth are always up in better shape than we were. And we stayed in Halifax for a while, and finally we got a good group of destroyers, and they ferried us over to the North Sea. So they come down the North Sea, and the North Sea in the winter of we left New York on 11/13, and didn't come back to New York until July '45. But the whole North Sea was tremendous activity with German submarines and so forth. And the North Sea is one of those areas where fog and everything else, you can't hardly see where you're going half the time. Everybody's blowing whistles, and all the German people are looking for noise to shoot at. And that was the height of the German buzz bomb area. So we pulled into Hull to unload. And we were in Hull for at least 2 weeks. And then Hull was a target on the buzz bombs from Germany. And I'll tell you, they were landing around, and the concussion would move a ship. If you had a door open, the door automatically closed with the concussion from the area. And from there, we moved down to Southampton. And by that time, the invasion was of such that all the fighting was on the eastern part of France. See, they'd already, by Christmas of 44, they were in the Paris area. And so that they decided they'd take this ship and they'd use it for shuttling. And they would run from Southampton to Rouen, France, up the river. And we shuttled there all that winter, carrying food and cargo and some ammunition, stuff that they needed. So we was on that shuttle. Well, that shuttle ran from Christmas until almost the 1st of July, 45. So a little bit later, in the latter part of July, towards the latter part of July, they sent the ship back to New York. Well, and I said, well, I'll take a month off. So anyhow, I took about 3 weeks off, and I came back to New York City, and they said, I got a ship for you. By that time, I'm a second assistant engineer. I took another license. So he said, we got another ship for you that is leaving New York, going to Norfolk, and going to Holland, or Bremerhaven. That's where the ship went to. And he says, they're extremely short of coal over there. The winter was extremely severe in 44 and 45, so they need coal. So we went to Norfolk. And overnight, they loaded 5,500 tons of coal. And at the Norfolk and Western Coal Dock, they just bring a whole car in, upset it, drop it in the ship through a chute in the ship. So the ship loaded overnight, and we left Norfolk, and this coal dock is right next to Norfolk NOB, the big operating base down there. And so by that time the heat had stopped in the Atlantic Ocean pretty much. So we just made a quick trip to Bremerhaven, Holland. Well, also they needed tugboats over there, and the Army Transportation Group. So just before the ship sailed, they put two 200-ton Army tugboats on the deck of the ship, tied them down securely, and then we sailed over there and loaded. And I got some pictures here of that. And so we got to Bremerhaven, and they unloaded everything. And at that time, they were the big part of the fracas was right on the eastern part of France, and so that we made 1 or 2 other trips shuttling, and we ended up in Bremerhaven. Then we made a couple trips on the shuttle to Antwerp, going up to Scheldeschuwer. So we got a good feeling for that. And then we spent a weekend in a weekend in Brussels, and I've got some pictures of that. So between Bremerhaven and Antwerp and Brussels, I got to know a little bit about that area. And finally, we got back to New York in August of 45. And it was about that time that they started, I think sometime in August 45 was the Hiroshima flight stuff. Well, just about that time, I had made up my mind. Beth and Steele said to me, we got a ship going from New Jersey to the Panama Canal to towards Japan. We need help bad. So I said, put my name down. And then just about that time, they bombed Hiroshima. So then the War Shipping Administration started to come up with a whole bunch of new plans. So that pretty much ended my marine work with ETO, the European Theater of Operations. But anyhow, I stayed with Bethlehem Steel. I'm single, and I stayed with Bethlehem Steel a little while longer. So Bethlehem Steel said that we need some help down at Baltimore in the shipyard at Sparrows Point. We're building some new vessels. We call them super high-octane tankers. We build them for the government to haul super octane gasoline for fighter planes. And we've got a new one down there called the Venor. It's not so new, it's about 6 months old. But he said, how'd you like to go to school on that? They're paying me good, damn good. So I said, yeah, I'll go. So I went down there for 6 months. And that was this country's first super tanker. And that tanker was 1,500 pounds steam, 600 feet long, 25,000 tons, and strictly for high-octane gasoline, which could be converted into ore carrying or bulk cargo. So I ended up down in there getting another license and ended up with a first assistance license, unlimited. So when I quit the Marine work in 1946, I ended up with a first assistance license, unlimited, with 2.5 stripes. And this is strictly all in the engineering black gang, so to speak, the operation ship. Not above deck, strictly below deck in propulsion work. And I enjoyed that pretty much. And I've been into a half a dozen bad francuses in the English Channel, where I've seen at least a half a dozen ships go down. I've seen a few destroyer escorts get whacked off, but nothing more than that. But a good education, a lot of scary things. I'm single, so hell, I had at that time I was. So I had no worries. Just my parents and my father told me what to expect because he was a Navy officer. And I think I enjoyed everything. I hated it like hell. Whenever you weren't sleeping, you were wearing a life jacket. You were also carrying your wallet with you and your passport with you and any papers. You had Siemens papers and everything. Everybody carries them. But whenever you weren't sleeping on a vessel, you was always wearing your life jacket.
Well, speaking of papers, you mentioned you had some photographs there. Why don't you show them off?
This is a picture of here's a bunch of government money. Here's a whole handful of French francs, Dutch guilders, Belgium money, money is beautiful. Look at it. Looks just like our money, but it's just French. Here's French francs galore and guilders like crazy. Here's a picture of me when I was in the ROTC in college. Here's a picture of a German surface raider that they captured somewhere. Here's a picture of the English Channel. Here's a pilot coming aboard the vessel in the North Sea, October 1945. Here's downtown Antwerp, I think. Here's a picture of these two tugboats on top of that Philip Thomas or a Reed boat. And these are 200-ton tugboats. These are the rascals on top of it. Here's the crane they used to unload them over in Rotterdam, and it says on the back here, 350-ton crane used to unload tugs in Bremerhaven, Germany. and it's all electric crane. It's October 1945. Here's the nameplate on the Thomas Reed. Now that was a fairly new ship. Here's maps of downtown Glasgow. Everybody traded at the Red Cross, whether you were in London or in Scotland. Here's some beautiful maps of Glasgow, Scotland, where everybody went to the Seamen's Club in Sauchiehall Street, and that was the main stem of Glasgow. And you could always catch a train from any one of these stations and go to Edinburgh or go up to the lakes or even go to London. The trains ran all during the period. And one weekend while we're in Southampton, we went to London. Here's a brand new train schedule dated May 22nd, 1944, for the commuter train between Southampton and London. And we did so one time in late 44, early 45, we were up there for a weekend. Then I also took a trip on the train down to Bournemouth. And Bournemouth is kind of like Jekyll Island. It's really a nice place to go and rest and enjoy the salt water. And of course everybody had free government postcards, and here's one in Southampton of the main dock, the immigration place, and a couple of the parks in downtown Southampton. And this is 1944. But one of the finest things I got in here, and I've talked to the people in Atlanta. Here's a newspaper clipping, and it's dated Monday, October 23rd, 1944. And here's pictures of the Navy Seabees work during the invasion. Now, the thing that amazed me on this picture here is they took these pictures, according to the write-up here, the first few weeks in May and mid-July. But they could not release these pictures to the American press until October 1944 because of the high engineering CB talent of how they did this. And so they took these precast concrete floats, lugged them from Southampton over here, and anchored them against the beach. See them? Then they tied them all together over here, and so that there's a freighter. See? And it could have been the freighter I was on, for all I know. But anyhow, they brought these freighters in because the water was 15, 20 feet deep out here, and tied them up there, unloaded them. Then they put a deck on top of them. See it? See it? They put a deck on top. And here they are bringing new equipment in. Now this was taken 1 and 2 weeks after the invasion. See? And it says these photos of this project was one that was discussed in the Quebec Conference in 1943. So all this stuff was planned in 43. Yet it was done in 44. And the pictures were taken during the invasion, but they weren't released until October. So that's how important this shebang was. And I've saved this all this time, and truthfully, I almost forgot that I had it until I found it about a month or two ago. I talked to the people in Atlanta in this Associated Press office down there if they wanted to rerun these, because and looking at them, their names are on a bunch of them. So I said, if you want reruns that are damn important along with the story, I said, just call me and you can have it. But they haven't called me back. But so I thought this was a pretty good piece of paper. So that's about the end of my trip, but I've enjoyed marine engineering, and that's all it is. It's just another business. I wouldn't, and it's a lucrative business. Marine engineers make fabulous salaries.
What have you done since 1946?
I've been in heavy construction, mechanical and electrical. And I'm retired. I've got a couple of PE licenses. I'm retired. And I spent 35 or 40 years working, 35 years working in the Cincinnati area.
And when did you move around here?
I bought this property and built this house down here in 63, 4, and 5. And I knew some people that were in the service that asked me to come down here and take a look.
And was that when you moved livestock and
barn?
dairy?
I live down on the lake, and I live in Hart County. I don't live in Franklin County, but I live in Hart County.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and talking with me today.
It's been a pleasure, and this is my first venture talking to anybody on this thing as far as what we've done in the last about this maritime program, because I just sailed and I just take this stuff and threw it in the cabinet, and this is it. I haven't hardly opened this stuff since then.